Did you know that back in 2004, Christopher Nolan was actually set to direct Brad Pitt's movie Troy, but due to some creative shifts and changes behind the scenes, it just didn't happen.
This idea of the Trojan horse, of sort of trying to show it with fresh eyes, that's been in my head for about 20 years because I was briefly attached to direct the film Troy for Warner Brothers.
But as fate has it, Nolan has now directed the Odyssey, and many in the pop culture community are terming this as a massive full circle moment for the director.
You're goddamn right.
Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is releasing this week, and right here, right now, I want to stress exactly why you should watch the movie Troy before watching The Odyssey, which is available to stream for free on YouTube. And I want to be clear, you shouldn't do this because Troy is something Nolan could have directed in another timeline. You should do it because Troy gives an incredibly strong prequel feeling to what Nolan is planning for us in The Odyssey. This is Sean Penn playing the role of Odysseus in Troy.
Play your tricks on me, but not my cousin.
You have your sword. I have my tricks.
And this very line is what Odysseus is famous for, his cunning intelligence. Be it the Trojan horse strategy, the nobody trick he played on the Cyclops Polyphemus, or how he passed the sirens, eventually leading them to their death, it's all the tricks of Odysseus. And the Odyssey, which is the journey back home to Ithaca, Odysseus faces a lot of challenges where more than his sword, it's his tricks that help him and his crew survive. And there is so much to unpack here between these two epic stories and the two defining heroes of Greek literature. So let's get right into this.
If they ever tell my story, let them say, I lived in the time of Achilles.
When we look back at the movie Troy, directed ultimately by Wolfgang Petersen, we see a very specific creative choice that I think perfectly sets up a Christopher Nolan universe. Troy completely stripped away the gods. If you have read Homer's Iliad, you know that the gods are everywhere. Athena is interfering, Apollo is raining down plagues, and Ares is literally on the battlefield. It is a story of divine intervention as much as it is of the human war. But the 2004 film grounded everything. The movie offered us a look at the Bronze Age that felt tactile. You could feel the heat of the Aegean sun and the absolute devastating cost of a spear piercing a shield. It was a movie about men trying to carve their names into history because they knew they were going to die and they knew the gods were not coming down to save them. This is exactly what Troy offers. It gives you the raw physical reality of the ultimate ancient war.
War is young men dying and old men talking. You know this. Ignore the politics.
It gives you the geopolitical landscape, and this is vital because you need to understand the harsh reality of the Trojan War to understand the trauma and exhaustion that Odysseus carries with him when the war finally ends. You need to see the physical toll of a 10-year siege to appreciate the psychological toll of a 10-year journey home.
Achilles is the past, a man loyal to no country.
How many battles have we won off the edge of his sword? This'll be the greatest war the world has ever seen. We need the greatest warrior.
But to understand the journey of the Odyssey, we first have to understand the Iliad, which at its core is not just about the Trojan War, but also about the rage of Achilles.
Is there no one else? Is there no one else?
In Troy, Brad Pitt gives us an Achilles who is essentially a rock star of the ancient world. He is unmatched, he is arrogant, he is deeply cynical, and yet he is painfully aware of his own tragic destiny. Achilles is given a choice early on by his mother. He can stay home, live a long, happy life, and eventually be forgotten by time. Or he can go to Troy, never return, die on the battlefield, but have his name echo through eternity.
Do you know what's there? Waiting, beyond that beach. Immortality! Take it! It's yours!
Achilles chooses glory, he chooses death. What Troy offers in its exploration of Achilles is a look at a man who is a prisoner of his own greatness. He is the ultimate weapon, but he is completely alienated from normal human life. He does not care about Agamemnon's politics, and he barely cares about the war itself until his cousin Patroclus is killed. Achilles represents the absolute zenith of physical prowess and martial honor, spectacular to look at but incredibly short-lived. When you watch Troy, you are watching the tragic culmination of the warrior ideal. Achilles burns everything down around him, including himself, just to be remembered. It is a tragic, beautiful, and terrifying thing to witness. But here is where the transition to our next epic becomes so fascinating. If Achilles is the thesis of the ancient hero, the man who dies young for glory, then Odysseus is the antithesis. And watching how these two interact in Troy is the absolute best primer you can get for the upcoming Nolan film.
What are you doing enthralled to that pig of a king? Ithaca cannot afford an enemy like Agamemnon. Are we supposed to fear him? You don't fear anyone, that's your problem. Fear is useful.
Even in a movie dominated by the sheer physical presence of Brad Pitt's Achilles and Eric Bana's Hector, Odysseus quietly steals almost every scene he is in. Odysseus is different from every other king and warrior on those beaches. He is not there for glory, he is not there to conquer. He is there because he made a promise to defend the marriage of Helen and Menelaus, and he is bound by honor to fulfill it. Unlike Agamemnon, who wants power, or Achilles, who wants immortality, Odysseus just wants to go home. Notice how Odysseus operates in Troy. When Agamemnon needs to convince Achilles to join the war, he does not send a great fighter. He sends Odysseus. Why? Because Odysseus is the only man whose mind Achilles actually respects. Achilles knows that Odysseus is not trying to outmuscle him. He is communicating with him on a level of intellect and mutual understanding. Throughout the movie, while everyone else is swinging swords and screaming about honor, Odysseus is observing.
We need to retreat! My army's never lost a battle yet! You won't have an army if you don't fall back!
When the Greek army is pushed back to the beaches and the morale is completely destroyed, it is not a speech about glory that saves them. It is Odysseus' mind. This is the fundamental difference between the two characters and the two epics. The Iliad is about surviving the battlefield through sheer force of will and physical dominance. The Odyssey is about surviving an incredibly hostile, unpredictable world through intellect, deception, patience, and cunning. Watching Troy shows you exactly why Odysseus survived the deadliest conflict in human history. He was not the strongest, he was not the fastest, but he was the smartest. And when you see him wandering the battlefield looking at the senseless slaughter, you can see the exhaustion in his eyes. This is the exact emotional state you need to see him in before you plunge into the Odyssey.
Let Achilles fight for honor. Let Agamemnon fight for power, and let the gods decide which man to glorify.
I want to dive a little deeper into why this specific transition from Achilles in Troy to Odysseus in Nolan's film is so vital for us as an audience. It comes down to the concept of home. In Troy, we watch Achilles actively reject the prospect of returning home. He is told that if he stays in Greece, he will be happy, but happiness is not enough for him. Achilles trades the warmth of the family and the peace of a quiet life for the cold, hard immortality of fame. He chooses to be a legend instead of a man. The movie Troy shows us the tragic emptiness of that choice. When Achilles is dying, there is no glory in his eyes. There is just a realization that it is all over. But now flip the script completely. Odysseus is offered immortality multiple times in his journey. In the original myths, the nymph Calypso literally offers to make him an immortal god if he will just stay on her island and abandon his quest to return to Ithaca. Odysseus says no. He rejects immortality. He rejects the exact thing that Achilles died for. Why? Because Odysseus realizes that being human, with all its pain, its aging, its grief, and its struggles, is worth it if it means he gets to hold his wife again. He chooses the wrinkles on Penelope's face over the eternal static youth of a goddess. He chooses his rocky, hard little island over a divine paradise. Watching Troy frames this choice beautifully. You watch Achilles throw his life away for a statue and a song. Then you step into the Odyssey and you watch your man fight tooth and nail, bleeding, starving, and drowning, just to get back to a simple, mortal life. It is the most profound character shift in literature. It is the evolution of the human hero. I guarantee you that Nolan is going to lean heavily into this. Nolan's protagonists are almost always driven by love and a desire for reunion. Cooper in Interstellar, crossing galaxies just to keep a promise to his daughter. Cobb in Inception, risking his entire sanity just to see his children's faces. Odysseus is the blueprint for all of them. By watching Troy, you are establishing the baseline of what a traditional hero is supposed to look like. You get the Brad Pitt Golden Boy warrior, then you let Nolan deconstruct that entirely with Odysseus. You watch a man who is broken, tired, and desperate, proving that true heroism is not how well you swing a sword, but how much you are willing to endure to get back to the people you love.
No one could stand between me and home. Not even the gods.
We have to talk about the climax of Troy because it is the ultimate narrative bridge into Nolan's Odyssey, the Trojan horse. For 10 years, the Greeks threw themselves at the walls of Troy and failed. Thousands of men died in the dirt. Then Odysseus looks at a piece of driftwood carved into a toy and he has a revelation.
Well, Odysseus, you found a way to make the sheep invite the wolves to dinner.
He uses the Trojans' own religious beliefs, their own pride against them. He builds the massive wooden horse, hides his best men inside and burns the camp to make it look like a surrender. It is a stroke of absolute genius, but I want you to really think about what happens next in the movie. When the Greeks come out of the horse in the dead of the night, they do not fight a glorious battle. It is a slaughter. It is a brutal, merciless sacking of a sleeping city. They burn temples, they kill unarmed men, and they destroy everything in their path. Odysseus is the architect of this destruction. It was his idea. The victory belongs to him. But watch Sean Penn's face during the sack of Troy, or even the few shots of Matt Damon we see in the Odyssey.
Help me go home.
Odysseus does not look victorious. He looks horrified. He looks burdened. He is watching the absolute worst of humanity unleashed, and he knows that it is his cleverness that opened the door for it. This is a massive turning point. In Greek literature, the sacking of Troy angers the gods deeply. The Greeks commit atrocities in the temples. They show no mercy, and because of this arrogance, the gods curse their journey home. Now, if Christopher Nolan's Odyssey keeps to the grounded psychological tone, which is his signature style, this moment from Troy is the perfect psychological trigger. Odysseus leaves the ruins of Troy not as a triumphant hero, but as a deeply traumatized veteran. He is carrying the guilt of the slaughter. He is carrying the weight of 10 years of death. He is a man fractured by war, stepping onto a boat, hoping the ocean will wash him clean so he can return to his family. As we know, the ocean does not wash him clean. It swallows him whole. This brings us to exactly what the Odyssey offers and why Nolan is the perfect visionary to bring it to life.
Ithaca's king is coming back.
No, he's not.
If Troy is a movie about the external physical clash of empires, then the Odyssey is a story about the internal psychological battle for a man's soul and his identity.
Already.
We shall fight on the beaches.
If he's loud and mean, that something bad will happen.
When you think about Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker, what are his obsessions? Time, memory, isolation, fragmented reality. The desperate drive of a protagonist trying to return to his family. Think about Inception, think about Interstellar, think about Memento and Dunkirk. Nolan builds entire cinematic worlds around characters who are isolated in hostile environments, battling against the relentless ticking of the clock, desperate to get back to their children or their wives. This is why the Odyssey is the ultimate Christopher Nolan project. It is the original story of a man lost in time and space trying to get home. What the Odyssey offers is not two armies clashing on a beach. It offers a man stripped of his army, stripped of his ships, and eventually stripped of his own name. It is a survival thriller. Odysseus has to face monstrous obstacles. Yes, but more importantly, he has to face isolation, temptation, and the terrifying prospect that he has been gone so long that his home might not even exist for him anymore. Nolan excels at creating tension out of the unknown. Imagine how he's going to handle the island of the Lotus Eaters, where the threat is not physical violence, but the temptation to forget your past and just stop fighting. Imagine his take on Circe, who strips men of their humanity. Imagine the terrifying, suffocating isolation of being trapped on Calypso's island for 7 years. Odysseus stares at the ocean, essentially trapped in a time dilation where the rest of the world is moving on without him. When you watch Troy first, you get the visceral memory of what Odysseus is trying to get back to and what he is running away from. You remember the golden armor, the vast armies, and the clear-cut rules of war. When Nolan plunges you into the Odyssey, all those rules are going to be thrown out of the window. Odysseus is going to be plunged into a surreal, hostile, disorienting nightmare. The contrast between Wolfgang Petersen's straightforward, sun-drenched historical epic and Christopher Nolan's mind-bending, psychologically intense survival thriller will be incredible. It is a difference between fighting an enemy you can see with a sword and fighting an enemy you cannot understand with your mind.
Get up, Prince of Troy. Get up. Won't let a stone take my glory.
Let's also talk about the cinematic experience of doing this double feature. I said earlier that watching Troy feels like a prequel, and I stand by that entirely. Troy is a film of grand, sweeping daytime shots, vast expanses of the Mediterranean Sea filled with 1,000 black sails, massive symmetrical formations of troops, a movie that makes you feel the sheer, overwhelming scale of an ancient superpower flexing its muscles. The score by James Horner, booming, tragic, classical. It feels exactly like reading an old history book brought to vivid, bloody life. You're watching events unfold from a bird's eye view. But Nolan is the opposite. He is the master of subjective storytelling. When you watch a Nolan film, you are trapped inside the protagonist's perspective. Nolan does not want you to just watch the events. He wants you to feel the panic, the disorientation, and the desperate heartbeat of the main character. When you transition from Troy to the Odyssey, you are going to experience a massive, deliberate contraction of the world. You're going to go from a beach with 50,000 screaming soldiers to a single broken wooden raft tossed in the middle of a pitch-black raging ocean. But here is the amazing part. This tonal shift is exactly what Odysseus himself experiences. He goes from being a general in a massive army surrounded by allies, rules, and clear objectives to being a solitary wanderer in a world that makes no sense, where his past victories mean absolutely nothing. Watching Troy sets up your expectations only for Nolan's Odyssey to completely pull the rug out from under you. It will make the isolation feel colder. It will make the stakes feel more intimate. It will make the danger feel less like a battlefield tactic and more like a psychological horror.
You're a man who needs to control his fate.
So we come back to where we started, that strange, fascinating piece of trivia from 2004, Christopher Nolan almost directing Troy. It is one of those great what-if moments in Hollywood history. What would a Nolan-directed Trojan War have looked like? We'll probably never get to see it, but I genuinely believe things worked out exactly as they were supposed to be. Nolan is a director for the older, wiser, traumatized man. He is a director for the man who manipulates time, who battles the elements, and who navigates a fractured reality just to see his family again. As fate has it, Nolan got the right epic. He got the complex one. He got the psychological one. He got the story that truly resonates with the themes he has been exploring his entire career. That does not mean Troy is not essential. It is the catalyst. It is the beginning of the thread. Before you buy your ticket for the Odyssey, before you sit down in that IMAX theater and let Christopher Nolan transport you into the mind of the ultimate survivor, go back to 2004 and watch Troy. Trust me, it will make the journey home in the Odyssey hit so much harder. It is the ultimate cinematic double feature, and it is a full circle moment you absolutely do not want to miss. If you found this video insightful and are interested in watching more, check out a trailer breakdown of the Odyssey right here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.